Just because someone isn't reaching out doesn't mean they aren't thinking about you. Silence is often mistaken for indifference, but in reality, it speaks volumes. It is in the moments of quiet that the mind becomes the loudest. When someone chooses not to speak, it doesn't mean that you have been erased from their thoughts. It doesn't mean that they've moved on completely or that they no longer care. More often than not, it means they are wrestling with emotions they don't know how to express, battling a pride too big to let them admit what they feel. The human mind is complex, and people don't always act in ways that align with their true emotions. There are countless reasons why someone may hold back from reaching out. Sometimes it's guilt, if they've hurt you, if they know they left things unfinished. They may be avoiding their own discomfort. They know that reaching out means facing the reality of their actions. It means confronting emotions they've been trying to suppress. They might be thinking about you late at night, replaying conversations, remembering the way you laughed, the way you looked at them when things were good. But instead of picking up the phone, instead of sending that message, they let their pride take over. They tell themselves, I can't. What if they don't respond? What if they've moved on? What if they're angry? And then there's fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of seeming weak. Society has conditioned many to believe that expressing emotions is a sign of weakness, that admitting to missing someone is equivalent to losing control. Some people would rather suffer in silence than admit they were wrong, than admit they still care, and so they do nothing. They hold on to their pride like a shield, convincing themselves it's better this way, that reaching out will only make things worse. But the truth is, their silence is not an absence of thought. It is the result of an internal struggle they haven't figured out how to overcome. Then there's the ego. Ego is one of the strongest forces that keep people from acting on their feelings. The ego doesn't like to be wrong. It doesn't like to admit fault. It doesn't like to put itself in a position where it could be ignored or rejected. And so, rather than risk being the one to make a move, the ego tells them to wait, to act like they don't care, to pretend that they're unaffected, even when deep down they are anything but. They assume that if they wait long enough, maybe you'll be the one to reach out first. Maybe you'll be the one to break the silence. But here's the thing. When someone is thinking about you, but their pride won't let them say it, that is not your burden to carry. It is not your responsibility to decode their silence, to sit around wondering what's going on in their mind. Too often people waste their energy trying to analyze someone's absence when they should be focused on their own presence, overthinking, replaying past moments, searching for signs. It all becomes exhausting. And yet it's a trap so many fall into because human nature craves answers. We want closure. We want to understand why someone who once seemed to care suddenly became distant. But the reality is, silence is an answer in itself. If someone is letting their pride control their actions, if they are choosing to sit in their thoughts rather than express them, that is a reflection of their own internal conflict. It has nothing to do with you. You don't need their words to validate your worth. You don't need to know exactly what they're thinking to move forward with your life. The moment you recognize that their silence does not mean you are forgotten, that it does not mean you are unimportant, is the moment you free yourself from the mental trap of waiting. People process emotions in different ways. Some are open, honest, and direct. Others hide behind pride, choosing avoidance over confrontation. It doesn't mean they don't feel anything. It means they don't know how to handle what they feel. But again, that is not your weight to carry. You are not responsible for someone else's emotional struggles. You are not required to sit in limbo, waiting for the moment they finally decide to push past their ego and reach out. The harsh truth is that some people will never admit what they truly feel. They will let time pass, convincing themselves that silence is the safer option. They will bury their emotions under distractions, hoping that if they ignore them long enough, they'll fade away. But emotions don't just disappear, they linger. They resurface in quiet moments. They show up in dreams, in unexpected memories, in songs that bring back feelings they try to suppress. And yet, even in those moments, some will still refuse to act on them. That's why you cannot base your own healing on whether or not they finally acknowledge their thoughts, whether or not they admit they miss you, whether or not they ever gathered the courage to say what's on their mind. None of that should dictate your ability to move forward. Because while they are trapped in their pride, you have the power to break free. While they sit in silence, you can choose growth, or they wonder if they should reach out. You can decide that you don't need them to. The truth is, if they are thinking about you, it means you left an impact. It means you were significant in their life. But significance does not always mean permanence. Some people will hold on to thoughts of you forever but never act on them. And that's okay. That's their journey, not yours. Waiting for someone to confirm their thoughts about you gives them power over your emotion. It creates an invisible chain that keeps you tied to their actions, their decisions, and their willingness or unwillingness to acknowledge what they feel. The moment you start craving validation from someone else, you place your happiness in their hands. You allow them to dictate your mood, your self-worth, your sense of inner peace. And that is a dangerous position to be in, because people are unpredictable. Their emotions change. Their circumstances shift. Their priorities evolve. If your sense of worth is dependent on whether or not someone acknowledges you, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. The mind plays tricks on you when you are emotionally invested in someone who is silent. You begin to search for signs, dissecting their every action or lack thereof, as if their silence holds some secret message. You wonder if they're thinking about you, if they regret their decisions, if they are waiting for you to reach out first. The more you seek answers, the more consumed you become with thoughts that lead nowhere. This is how negative feelings take root. They thrive in uncertainty. They grow stronger in moments of self-doubt. They whisper lies, making you believe that their lack of validation means you weren't important, that their silence means they have forgotten you. But none of that is true. People don't forget someone who left an impact on them. They don't erase meaningful connections overnight. But that doesn't mean they will always have the courage to express what they feel. It doesn't mean they will act in ways that provide the reassurance you crave. And that's why you must learn to detach. You must break free from the idea that their validation determines your value. You must train your mind to stop seeking external confirmation and instead recognize your own worth, independent of their actions. When you place too much importance on someone else's recognition, you create an emotional imbalance. You begin to measure your self-esteem based on whether or not they acknowledge you. You overthink their silence, their social media activity, their responses or lack of responses. You start to internalize their actions as a reflection of your own value, when in reality, their behavior has everything to do with them and very little to do with you. The truth is, people operate based on their own emotions, their own struggles, their own level of self-awareness. Some people hold back because they fear vulnerability. Some let their pride control them. Some are simply too caught up in their own world to consider how their silence affects others. Whatever the reason, it is never about your worth. It is about their ability or inability to process what they feel. Emotional detachment is not about not caring. It's about refusing to let someone else's actions control your inner state. It's about recognizing that your peace, your happiness, and your confidence should never be dependent on whether or not someone gives you attention. True strength is found in the ability to stand firm in your own worth, regardless of external validation. When you detach from the need for someone's words, you regain control over your emotions. You free yourself from the cycle of overthinking, waiting, and wondering. You stop analyzing their every move and start focusing on your own. There is immense power in knowing that you are enough without their confirmation, without their apology, without their recognition. The moment you embrace this mindset, everything changes. You no longer feel anxious about whether or not they are thinking about you. You no longer feel the urge to check their social media, to decode their behavior, to wait for them to make the first move. Instead, you shift your energy back to yourself. You begin to invest in your growth, your peace, your happiness. And something incredible happens when you do this. The very people who once seemed distant start to feel your absence. They begin to notice that you are no longer seeking their validation. They begin to realize that they no longer have emotional control over you. People are drawn to those who exude confidence and self-assurance. When you detach from the need for validation, you radiate a different kind of energy, one that commands respect. You are no longer in a position of emotional dependence. You are no longer controlled by someone's silence. Instead, you are in control of yourself. And that is the most powerful position you can be in. The key is to shift your perspective. Instead of focusing on what they are thinking, focus on what you are thinking. Instead of wondering if they miss you, ask yourself if you are truly prioritizing your own well-being. Instead of hoping for their validation, validate yourself. Your time is too valuable to be wasted on overanalyzing someone who isn't giving you clarity. Your energy is too precious to be spent waiting for someone to acknowledge what you already know, that you are worthy, that you are enough, that you deserve peace. The mind has a way of trapping you in cycles of unnecessary pain. It takes a single thought, one small doubt, one tiny question, and turns it into a storm of emotions that consume your energy. You start questioning everything. You replay old conversations, searching for clues, wondering if you missed something. You analyze their silence, convincing yourself that there's a deeper meaning behind it. You think about what they might be feeling, what they might be going through, and suddenly you are living in their world instead of your own. This is what happens when you allow someone else's lack of communication to take up space in your mind. You let their absence fill your thoughts, and before you realize it, you are carrying emotions that don't belong to you. You are overburdened with feelings that stem from assumptions rather than facts. You are creating scenarios in your head, trying to figure out why they are distant, why they aren't reaching out, why they haven't said what you want to hear. And the longer you dwell in this space, the more you suffer. Negative feelings thrive in uncertainty. The human mind hates the unknown, so it tries to fill in the gaps. It creates explanations, assumptions, theories, all in an attempt to bring closure to something that feels unfinished. But the problem is, most of these explanations are rooted in fear. You assume the worst. You convince yourself that their silence means they don't care, that their pride means they've moved on, that their lack of effort means you were never as important to them as they were to you. And none of that is necessarily true. The mind distorts reality when it is emotionally invested. It amplifies small things and turns them into mountains. It takes a moment of silence and transforms it into rejection. But what if their silence has nothing to do with you? What if their pride isn't a reflection of how they feel about you, but rather a reflection of their own inner struggles? What if they are caught in their own emotional turmoil, unsure of how to navigate their feelings? What if they think about you every day, but don't know how to express it. These are possibilities just as real as the negative ones your mind creates. The truth is, you don't know what's happening in their mind. You don't know their fears, their regrets, their internal battles. And because you don't know, you must stop making their silence mean more than it does. Holding on to negative feelings because of someone else's pride is a form of self-inflicted suffering. It is allowing yourself to feel abandoned when you are not. It is taking their lack of words and turning it into a personal attack. It is allowing their inability to communicate to dictate your emotional well-being. The longer you dwell on it, the more power you give away. You start feeling anxious, restless, emotionally drained. You carry the weight of unspoken words, unresolved emotions, unanswered questions. You let their silence create doubt within you, and doubt is a dangerous thing. Doubt makes you question your worth. Doubt makes you believe you were never enough. Doubt makes you forget that your value is not determined by anyone else's ability to express their feelings. You have to recognize when your mind is playing tricks on you. You have to become aware of when you are overthinking, when you are attaching meaning to things that don't require it. You have to catch yourself when you start making assumptions about someone else's thoughts and feelings. The moment you realize that most of your pain comes from your own thoughts rather than reality, you take back control. You stop waiting for their validation. You stop holding on to the idea that they need to say something in order for you to feel closure. You stop letting their pride dictate how you feel about yourself. Letting go of negative emotions does not mean pretending you don't care. It does not mean forcing yourself to be numb. It simply means refusing to let their silence be a source of pain. It means acknowledging that you cannot control what they do, but you can control how you respond. It means reminding yourself that you are not defined by someone else's actions, that your happiness is not dependent on whether or not they finally say what you want to hear. You cannot heal while still holding onto the hope that they will give you closure. You cannot move forward while clinging to the idea that they need to break their silence in order for you to be at peace. The only way to free yourself is to shift your focus back to yourself, to reclaim your energy, to stop feeding into the cycle of overthinking and start pouring that energy into something that benefits you. Because the truth is, no matter how much they think about you, no matter how much their pride stops them from reaching out, your life does not pause for them. You have a choice. You can stay stuck in the loop of waiting, wondering, and wishing, or you can choose to rise above it. You can choose to take back your power, to stop letting their lack of action define your emotions. Your emotions are a direct result of where you place your focus. When your mind is consumed with thoughts of someone who refuses to acknowledge their feelings, you unknowingly drain your own energy. You give them space in your head without them even realizing it. You replay memories, analyze every interaction, and wonder what they might be thinking. But the more you focus on them, the less attention you give to yourself. You let their silence dictate your emotions. You allow their pride to determine how you feel about yourself. And in doing so, you place your happiness in someone else's hands. What you must understand is that people don't always act on their emotions. They may feel something deeply, but allow their pride, their fears, or their own insecurities to hold them back. They may think about you constantly, but refuse to reach out because of their ego. But no matter how much they feel, if they are not willing to act, it does not serve you to dwell on it. It does not benefit you to keep waiting, hoping, or wishing that they will suddenly change. Your peace, your mental clarity, your emotional stability should never be dependent on whether or not someone finds the courage to express themselves. When you spend too much time thinking about why they won't say what you already know they feel, you get stuck in a cycle of frustration and confusion. You feel powerless because you are waiting for something outside of your control. You are waiting for them to validate your thoughts, to confirm what your heart already knows. But the problem with waiting for external validation is that it keeps you trapped. It keeps you emotionally dependent on their actions. It makes you feel like you cannot move forward until they take a step. And that is where suffering begins. You must shift your attention away from them and back to yourself. You must take the energy you are spending on wondering about their thoughts and redirect it toward your own growth. When you focus on what they are doing, you place your life on hold. You start being fully present in your own journey because a part of you is still waiting for them to show up in a way that they may never be able to. And the longer you wait, the more you deprive yourself of the happiness you deserve. Think about how much mental space they take up in your mind. How many times a day do you find yourself thinking about what they might be feeling? How often do you analyze their silence, trying to decode its meaning? Now imagine if all of that energy was redirected towards something that benefits you. Imagine if you use that same intensity to build yourself up rather than waiting for them to come around. The truth is, what you focus on expands. If you focus on their absence, you will feel it more deeply. If you focus on their silence, it will feel louder. But if you shift your attention to yourself, if you invest in your own growth, you will begin to realize that you never needed their words to confirm your worth in the first place. This is not about ignoring your feelings. It is about learning to manage them in a way that does not leave you feeling powerless. You can acknowledge that they might think about you without needing them to admit it. You can accept that their pride may be stopping them from speaking while still choosing to move forward. You do not need closure from them to find peace within yourself. You do not need them to say what you already know in order to feel whole. Emotional independence is the key to reclaiming your power. It means no longer waiting for someone else to take action before you decide to move on. It means recognizing that your life does not pause just because someone is struggling to express their emotions. It means making a conscious choice to prioritize yourself instead of waiting for validation that may never come. When you detach from the need for their words, you free yourself from the emotional chains that have been holding you back. You stop feeling like a prisoner to their silence. You regain control over your own happiness. Every time you catch yourself thinking about what they might be feeling, bring your attention back to yourself. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What do I need at this moment? How can I shift my focus towards something that benefits me? These questions will remind you that your emotions should not be dictated by someone else's inability to communicate. They will help you reframe your thoughts so that you are no longer waiting for something outside of your control. What you must remember is that just because someone is thinking about you, just because they may even regret their silence, does not mean they will ever act on it. And that is why you cannot base your emotions on the possibility of their return. You cannot put your happiness on hold because of their inability to express what they feel. Instead, you must focus on what is real, on what you can control. And what you can control is where you direct your attention, how you choose to interpret their silence, and most importantly, how you decide to move forward, with or without them. The mind has a way of creating illusions, making you believe that the person who remains silent holds more power over your emotions than they actually do. You start thinking about them more, analyzing their absence, and convincing yourself that their silence carries some deep hidden meaning. The truth is, silence can mean many things, but the most dangerous thing it can do is keep you stuck in a state of emotional limbo. You keep waiting for a sign, for a word, for some kind of confirmation that they are still thinking about you. And while you wait, you place your own life on hold. The reason silence feels so powerful is that it leaves room for your mind to fill in the gaps. You start making assumptions, creating scenarios, and attaching meanings to things that may not even exist. Maybe they miss you but are too proud to say it. Maybe they regret losing you but don't know how to admit it. Maybe they think about you every night but refuse to let their pride break. These thoughts might bring you temporary comfort, but they also keep you emotionally attached to someone who is no longer present in your life in the way you wish they were. You become caught in an endless loop of waiting for them to break their silence, waiting for them to confirm what you already suspect, waiting for them to validate the emotions you feel. But waiting is dangerous. Waiting keeps you stuck. Waiting makes you forget that you are in control of your own emotions, not them. It is easy to believe that if someone is thinking about you, it must mean something. That if they still have you in their mind, there is still a connection. But the reality is, thoughts alone don't change anything. Thinking about you doesn't mean they will reach out. It doesn't mean they will fight for you. It doesn't mean they will set aside their pride and admit what they feel. Many people think about what they've lost, but never do anything about it. Many people hold feelings inside, but never act on them. And if you spend all your time fixating on their possible thoughts, you will trap yourself in a place of longing instead of moving forward with your life. You have to separate what you know from what you assume. You may know that they care, but you assume they will come back. You may know that they think about you, but you assume that it will lead to something. You may know that their pride is stopping them from speaking, but you assume that one day they will overcome it. These assumptions keep you stuck because they make you believe that there is something coming, that there is something worth waiting for. But the hard truth is, you do not need to wait. You do not need to put your life on pause for someone else's emotional. If they wanted to break their silence, they would. If they wanted to fight for you, they would. If they wanted to be in your life, they would find a way. It is difficult to accept this because the mind clings to hope. Hope is what keeps you looking back. Hope is what keeps you checking your phone, wondering if today will be the day they finally say what you've been waiting to hear. Hope is what keeps you in a cycle of emotional dependency, making you believe that you cannot fully move on until you get the closure you seek. But closure is not something that always comes from another person. Sometimes closure is simply accepting what is. It is understanding that their pride, their silence, their inability to express their emotions is not your burden to carry. It is not your responsibility to wait for them to grow. It is not your job to stay stuck in the past while they figure themselves out. Emotional freedom comes when you stop expecting anything from them, when you stop waiting for them to break their silence, when you stop hoping that their thoughts of you will translate into action. Emotional freedom means realizing that what they feel is their problem, not yours. It means recognizing that your happiness does not depend on whether or not they decide to speak. It means reclaiming your power, shifting your focus, and understanding that you do not need their words to confirm what you already know about yourself. When you stop waiting for their validation, you take back control of your emotions. You stop feeling powerless. You stop allowing their silence to dictate your mood. You start realizing that whether they think about you or not, your life continues. You have a purpose beyond them. You have dreams, goals, and personal growth that should not be hindered by someone else's emotional struggles. Every time you catch yourself wondering if they are thinking about you, remind yourself that it does not matter unless they act on it. Thinking about you won't change your life. Their pride won't change your reality. Only you have the power to move forward. Only you have the ability to decide how much longer you will let their silence affect you. The moment you stop waiting, the moment you stop overanalyzing, the moment you stop giving their silence more meaning than it deserves, is the moment you set yourself free. There is a moment when you must decide that your well-being is worth more than the unanswered questions. That your mental peace holds more value than the silent battle someone else is waging within themselves. When you spend so much time wondering if they are thinking about you, if they are regretting their silence, If they're holding back because of pride, you give them more space in your life than they are actively taking. You allow their absence to hold weight, to dictate your emotions, to cloud your clarity, and in doing so, you lose sight of what really matters: yourself. Silence is not always a weapon. Sometimes it is just an empty void that we fill with our own emotion. You attach meaning to it, thinking that if they are silent, it must mean something deep, something complicated, something that suggests they are struggling with their own feelings. And maybe they are. Maybe their thoughts are consumed with you. Maybe they replay memories just as much as you do. Maybe they feel the pull but refuse to admit it, even to themselves. But what does that change for you? How does their silent longing benefit you? It doesn't, because thoughts alone do not bring people back. Feelings alone do not mend broken connections, and pride is often stronger than desire. It is easy to get caught in the illusion that the person who remains silent is somehow in control of the situation, that their unspoken emotions hold power over you. But the reality is, they are just as trapped as you are. The difference is they have chosen to sit with their silence, to let their pride dictate their actions. You, however, have a choice. You can decide to do the same, to sit and wait for them to move, or you can take control of your own path and move forward, regardless of whether they follow. What you must understand is that attachment to an unresolved situation is what keeps you feeling stuck. You replay the past, searching for signs, for reasons, for an explanation that makes sense. You hope for a resolution that may never come, a moment where they finally acknowledge what you already know, that they care, that they feel, that they think about you just as much as you think about them. But even if that moment came, even if they admitted everything, would that change anything? Would it erase the waiting, the overthinking, the moments you spent questioning your worth because of their silence? Or would it simply confirm what you suspected all along, only after you had already suffered through the uncertainty? You have to make peace with the fact that not everyone is capable of expressing themselves in the way you want them to. Some people would rather sit in their own pride than take the risk of vulnerability. Some people would rather keep their emotions locked away than face them head on. But you do not have to be one of those people. You do not have to mirror their silence with your own. You do not have to let their inability to speak become your burden to carry. You have the power to let go, to move forward, to decide that your emotional well-being is not tied to someone else's internal battle. There is freedom in choosing yourself. There is power in saying, I do not need their words to validate what I already know. Because deep down, you already know the truth. You know that if they wanted to express themselves, they would. You know that if they wanted to break their silence, nothing would stop them. And you also know that if they are too proud to acknowledge their feelings, that is their battle, not yours. Your job is not to wait for them to have a breakthrough. Your job is to focus on yourself, to redirect your energy away from overanalyzing their silence and toward building your own peace. Every moment you spend thinking about why they won't speak is a moment you take away from your own happiness. Every time you let their pride frustrate you, you allow them to have emotional control over you. But the moment you decide to detach from their actions, to stop searching for hidden meanings in their silence, to let go of the need for closure, you take that power back. You remind yourself that your happiness is not dependent on whether or not they can overcome their own ego. Your joy is not determined by whether or not they ever find the courage to say what they feel. You cannot spend your life waiting for people to do what they should have done in the first place. You cannot allow yourself to be emotionally tethered to someone who chooses their pride over connection. You deserve more than unanswered questions, more than silence that keeps you up at night, more than a love that refuses to show itself. The moment you accept that their silence is not a reflection of your worth, but of their own limitations, you set yourself free.